Remember, it's not about blame, it's about understanding the deeper needs and fears driving both partners and creating safety for real intimacy to flourish again. And you do that step by step by step, layer by layer by layer. Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a sex and intimacy coach for married couples. My mission is to help you build and maintain a sexually vibrant and emotionally intimate marriage. Join me each week as we explore principles and practical tools based on Christian values to create the passionate, joyful, and thriving marriage you're designed to have. What happens when the person who usually initiates sex in your marriage suddenly decides to stop initiating? What do you do when days turn into weeks or months with no or just a low level of sexual connection, making it feel like the new normal for both partners in the marriage? How do you get out of this cycle when it feels like a sick and twisted version of an old Western duel showdown, with your hand hovering over your gun at your hip, waiting for the other person to initiate, make the first move? Anyway, in this episode, I'm going to explain exactly why this devastating pattern happens, share a real story of a couple who broke through it, and by the end, you'll know 4 specific steps to untangle this knot and get your sexual connection back on track. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Dan Purcell. I am a marriage and intimacy coach who's helped hundreds of couples navigate exactly this kind of sexual standoff. And I have mobile apps used by over 500,000 couples to build stronger relationships. You'll find links to everything in the description below. All right, first let's talk about what's normal. In most relationships, one person generally does more of the initiating of sex, and there's nothing wrong with this. It just means that person has a higher desire for sex than the other. I mean, someone's got to be the CIO in your marriage, right? CIO meaning Chief Initiation Officer. And it may not feel fair to you, but that's just the way it is in most marriages. Most of the time, this dynamic, where one spouse initiates more often than the other, it actually works really well because the one being pursued often loves feeling pursued. They find it erotic, and they respond positively to the others initiating. In fact, many people's erotic orientation, that's a fancy way of saying how they get turned on, is fueled by the focus and pursuit and attention of the other person. There's something incredibly sexy about being the object of your lover's desire, and it feels amazing to be wanted, to be chased, and to know that your partner just can't keep their hands off of you. So this works in most marriages until it doesn't. So let me tell you a story about Jennifer and Jeff, names changed of course. Jeff was clearly the higher desire spouse in their marriage. He was the CIO. He was also the one who usually initiated sex, planned romantic getaways, and generally pursued physical intimacy. Jennifer loved feeling desired by her husband. But here's where things got complicated in their relationship, and it was gradual. But the pressures of life just complicated their life, such as, growing children and their increasing needs, schools, career, volunteer work, church, health challenges, and so on. So the combination of all these challenges just magnified some of the insecurities that Jennifer had in the bedroom. So when Jeff would make advances, she'd often brush him off. Not because she didn't love him, or that she didn't want a deep relationship with him, or she wasn't attracted to him, but just because she didn't feel up for sex at the time. But the problem is it became chronic, meaning it just happened a lot over time. So over time, Jeff got tired of feeling rejected. In fact, he got really tired because it just felt like a chronic rejection, a chronic no when it came to sex. She just wasn't interested. So things came to a head one weekend after a long summer trip away to see extended family. While the kids slept in the back seat on the long drive home, Jeff and Jennifer talked about how they want to do better when it came to intimacy in their marriage. And they both agreed, yeah, we need to do better at this. So the next day after they came home for the trip, Jeff came up behind Jennifer while she was folding laundry and has wrapped his arms around her and whispered in the ear something really sexy about what he'd like to do to her. Jennifer instinctively pushed him away, and in her mind, this was not the right time or place, with all that had to be done around the house after being away for such a long time. You get it, right? Anyway, Jeff got upset. And he's like, we talked about this in the car yesterday, that you're going to work harder at being more open to my pursuing you. And she shot back, no, but this is a bad time. He's like, it's always a bad time. And she gave him a look. You just don't get it. Then Jeff said to Jennifer, Why am I always the one putting myself out there? It hurts feeling rejected. I'm so done with this. From now on, it's on you to initiate. I'll be here ready for you whenever you're ready, but don't expect me to initiate anymore. It's not good for me and it's not good for us when it always turns into a fight. And he left in a huff. And true to his word, Jeff stopped initiating entirely. He secretly hoped that the absence of his pursuit of sex would motivate Jennifer to step in and fill the vacuum, fill the void, and she'd do more of, in his mind, her share of the pursuing in the marriage. A few days passed, and Jennifer thought about initiating sex, but then remembered that now that it was up to her to do all the initiating, she felt an immense amount of pressure to do it right. And that pressure zapped her sense of feeling sexy, so she put it off. And the more she put it off, the more pressure mounted until she just gave up initiating sex entirely too. So as these weeks turned into months with zero sexual advances from either partner, both were feeling even more distant than ever in their marriage. And Jeff became more critical of Jennifer's absence of pursuing anything sexual. This got him more upset that Jennifer wouldn't step up and started to lose hope in his marriage. The more upset he got, the less Jennifer wanted to approach him because being with an upset man is, by the way, not sexy at all. After all, in Jennifer's mind, it was Jeff's decision to stop initiating, not hers. So why does it have to be her to break the ice? It should be on Jeff. So she saw him as critical, so she kept her distance. Couples like Jeff and Jennifer get stuck in this pattern all the time, and it's a tangled knot. I like the imagery of a tangled knot because the more you pull on one end of the string, the messier and tighter the knot gets. That's because the main issue they're struggling with here, his and her not initiating, is usually not just one, but a symptom of many other issues that are stacking and compounding on each other. So, what are the deeper issues? First of all, let me tell you that I am certain that any couple can untangle their marriage knots, no matter how difficult the knots are, if you get the right kind of help. No matter how enmeshed you feel today, I want you to know that there's hope, and you don't have to stay stuck in your knots forever. So my first step in helping you untangle this knot is to invite you to step back and look at the problem a little differently, to look at your cycles or patterns step by step. Here's what I mean. Intimacy issues, like Jeff and Jennifer's, usually are a cycle or a pattern where A triggers B, then B reacts to A, which triggers A again, which then reacts to B, and so on, around and around and around. They just keep triggering each other. In essence, it's Jeff insisting that Jennifer do all the initiating from now on because he's tired of feeling rejected. And that shifts an enormous burden of pressure off of Jeff onto Jennifer. And that pressure shuts her down in her desire to initiate. So she keeps not initiating, and Jeff feels more rejected. And so on and around it goes. Do you see that cycle? The key is to identify your pattern, break it down step by step, so that you can make different choices. It doesn't matter which step you are on the cycle, just make a better choice at one step and make that decision be something that's healthier for the marriage. All right, so we talked about how patterns and cycles are very common in marriages where A triggers B, and in response, B triggers A, and then around and around it goes. Another key principle is this idea of homeostasis. Homeostasis is like a thermostat that tries to keep temperatures at a certain level or within a certain range, even if that range isn't healthy or comfortable, right? Anyway, the new homeostasis in Jeff and Jennifer's marriage has become that of low intimacy, and unfortunately, unless one or both in the marriage decide to do something different, the natural relationship forces of homeostasis are keeping their marriage, their sex life, standoff, in that same low-level place. And it'll stay that way for a long time. It'll prolong low level of intimacy and prolong their Cold War in their marriage. But that's not all, though. Many times, there are strong forces that act in the marriage beneath the surface. Let me give you a few examples of what I see in my coaching practice. For example, if you're a person that came from a home with a critical parent, it makes you sensitive to criticism, especially from your spouse, because criticism was used as a tool by your loved ones to get you to do what they wanted them to do. So here's another one. If your pursuit of sex has a lot to do with feeding your ego or, validation seeking, your sense of self is going to be threatened when you don't get it. So you begin to try other ways of getting the validation. What I mean is, this can look like a lot of pouting, holding a grudge, or whatever an adult version of a tantrum is to try to get what you want. Another is, if your view of sexuality is something that belongs not to yourself, but to your spouse or to your marriage. In other words, something that you're obligated to do, like you have an obligation to be sexual, it'll vaporize passion faster than the morning sun shining on the dew of the grass. So, on one hand, when your spouse stops initiating, it's actually a relief because you feel like freedom from an obligation. Whew, I don't have to engage in that anymore. But on the other hand, you expect your spouse to give you sex because they're obligated to, because that's what you're supposed to do whenever you want it. So if you got those patterns, those thought patterns beneath the surface, those just compound the problem even more. And it keeps the things in homeostasis, keeps the cycle going around and around. Hey friend, let me interrupt you for a second. I have 3 things you need to know. Number 1 is September is coming up, and this is a tradition we have at Get Your Marriage On. It's Sextember. We make the September month sexy, and this is why it's special, because kids are back to school, and you're ready to go back to a sense of a schedule, something a little more normal. This is the best time in your marriage to do something to increase sexual intimacy and strengthen that in your marriage. So we're having a celebration, a contest, a challenge, if you will. You download the Intimately Us app, and all those details are going to be in the app. And it's a month-long challenge called Sextember. Second thing is we have our men's and women's small group coaching cohorts starting on September 2nd and 3rd. This is limited to just 6 to 10 women or 6 to 10 men, and you're in a private group. Everything's confidential. You work with a coach, you go through a course in our program, and it's over a 14-week period, and it is a phenomenal program. We just graduated people in our last cohort, and we're just so excited at the shifts that happened in their relationship. So be sure to sign up. You'll find those details in the show notes and on our website. The third thing is on September 26th and 27th. That's the last weekend in September. I am putting on a virtual getaway. Now, this is where you get a hotel room or you send your kids to grandma's house for the weekend. And you get to join me and my team for the weekend, where we will teach you live some really fun things about arousal and improving sexual intimacy in your marriage. We're going to give you 3 specific new practices that you probably don't do much in your relationship today to really enhance sexual intimacy. The reason why that's so important is it helps you create a stronger marital bond. Couples with great sex lives have a strong, strong marriage. So do it for your marriage. All those details on our website. Thank you. All right, now that you got the background, you understand the principles, let's talk about how Jeff and Jennifer untangled their mess. And they did this in 4 steps. The first step to stop this vicious cycle was to shift their focus off of what their spouse isn't or isn't doing and onto themselves. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaches that we spend so much time and energy trying to get the speck out of our neighbor's eye, but ignore the plank or beam in our own eye. For example, Jeff's focal point was all on Jennifer, that she had to change. His insistence that she do the initiating from now on puts a spotlight off of himself and onto her, and in the process, he deceives himself in thinking he's off the hook. He doesn't need to be responsible for his part in the marriage anymore. This conversation, this blow-up that he had with Jennifer when they're in the bedroom folding laundry, it would have gone very differently if instead he said, "Look, I need to stop initiating for a time, maybe a month. I need to figure out for myself why I feel so rejected when you're not available for sex, and why I behave so immaturely when things just don't go my way. I think if I took a month off from initiating, my choice, that will give me the space I need to work through my own insecurities and reactions that are affecting our marriage." Do you see how in that example, if Jeff would have approached it that way? Now, the behavior is the same. Jeff is stopping initiating. But the focus, the spotlight isn't on Jennifer. He puts it squarely on himself. Anytime any person in the relationship takes full responsibility for their tasks in the marriage, their own tasks, the relationship will instantly get better. Okay, the second step that helped them is to stop the criticism. When Jeff meets Jennifer's lack of erotic enthusiasm with frustration about her not doing her share of the initiating, for example, what Jennifer hears is criticism. I'm not good enough. No matter what I do, it'll never be enough for him. I'll never satisfy him. So she figures, why try? Why even try if I'm never going to be good enough for Jeff? Jennifer had to reframe these situations from seeing it as a criticism of her to maybe this is Jeff reaching out. This is a bid for connection. As sloppy as it is, it really is Jeff trying to connect with her. At the same time, Jeff needed to check his energy behind his initiating in these moments, because when he initiates out of frustration, even though his frustration may be completely valid, it's received like criticism for Jennifer. Jennifer needed to check her childhood. She had a critical mother that used criticism to get her children to do what the mom wanted to do. So she had to kind of disentangle that within herself and not be so sensitive and reactive to criticism. And both partners, in this sense, needed to develop this ability to calm the heck down. And that's the process of like not being so reactive, being so emotionally driven all of the time, and address their disappointments without really blaming each other. But this took practice. This wasn't an overnight thing for Jeff and Jennifer, but it was an essential step. The third step was for them to develop more self-reliance. Now, if Jeff's sense of how he is as a husband or how he is as a person depends entirely on whether Jennifer receives his sexual advances, that puts him in a really vulnerable spot, right? He's very dependent on his wife to be a certain way in order for him to feel a certain way. So no wonder why rejection hurts so bad, because he feels anxious about his value and worth. So when Jeff depends on her for validation, in other words, for his sense of who he is, he's going to try to control the relationship to get it. So he's going to throw the tantrum or the pouting or get upset. Like those are all control moves, or criticize, right? That puts an unfair burden on Jennifer that she needs to be a certain way to make her husband happy about himself. So Jeff needed to learn how to be fine regardless of how Jennifer responded to his invitations for sex. And this doesn't mean he stopped caring. It cares very deeply, but it means he doesn't psychologically depend on her positive response all the time for him to define his worth anymore. Now, this isn't all on Jeff. No matter your tangle, no matter your cycle you're in, both spouses have a share of the responsibility to do. It's not all on one. So Jennifer has her work to do here too, because she was too sensitive to his criticism. And so she had this pattern of avoiding problems to kind of preserve her sense of herself. Because in the short run, if she can say no and get someone to back off, it kind of gave her a little bit of breathing room, right? But in the end, she never really addressed the issues. She just kept running from them. So she had to learn how to address things. She also learned that sometimes disappointing people who matter to you is sometimes unavoidable, and that's part of life, and it's okay. All right, step 4 for this couple is focus on connection, not performance. So one Sunday night, Jeff decided it was time to break the cycle, and he asked Jennifer if she'd like to have sex. But of course, he said that in a much more romantic and sexy way, right? Hey babe, want to have some fun tonight? Whatever he said. Anyway, feeling pursued by Jeff again was a huge turn on for Jennifer. It was an aphrodisiac. So guess what? They did. And they had a really good time. And it broke the dry spell. And it felt so different this time because it wasn't about egos getting in the way or proving who was right or who was wrong in the argument. It was like, see, I told you so. You should have initiated a long time ago. It wasn't any of that. There was no I told you so's. It was about, hey, I love you, I miss you, and I want you. So it's about getting back to enjoying each other for enjoyment's sake, without the pressure of sex as being the end goal or making sex mean something about your ego or about your validation, your sense of yourself. Then you're free. They're less tangled up in it, less in the sex. And they can see sex as something like it's recreational, it's fun, it's relationship building, it's bonding. It's a special way for us to set aside our cares and our worries for a little while, put all the adulting away for a second And we can play, we can relax and enjoy doing something together we both actually really like. And it feels really good too at the same time. So if this is you tangled in a knot, it's been a long time, or you just feel exhausted from months of hurt, it just feels overwhelming, sometimes you'll be amazed how quickly the spark will return to your marriage once you focus on making sex about relaxing and enjoying each other, and not about trying to prove something to each other. Now, I recommend that couples like Jennifer and Jeff get professional help to work through these knots. So, friends, cut your misery short. Life is too short to be tangled up in this unnecessary mess, and get back to having a passionate marriage. A professional with the right training, like myself and those on my team, can help you undo these knots faster and more effectively than you just trying to do it all on your own. So, if you're in a position where your spouse has suddenly stopped initiating, or you've stopped initiating, I highly encourage you to work together to resolve this before too much time passes. These knots are so much easier to untangle when they're relatively small. And if it's been a long time for you, rest assured that with the right help and tools, you can absolutely untangle even the most difficult knots and rebuild something beautiful in your relationship. Remember, it's not about blame, it's about understanding the deeper needs and fears driving both partners and creating safety for real intimacy to flourish again. And you do that step by step by step, layer by layer by layer. Whatever you decide to do about this topic, I encourage you to decide together with honesty and openness. Focus on what will serve your marriage best, because your marriage deserves the best. Your children will benefit immensely from parents that have learned how to solve their intimacy problems. And they benefit from a mom and dad that actually really love each other and have a great sexual relationship. In fact, other couples in your circle will feel the difference in your marriage and will look up to you as a good example to follow. My team and I are professionals at helping couples with matters related to sex, intimacy, and marriage. And we do it from a Christian perspective and a methodical, science-backed process that works. I'm proud to say our program is really effective, and most couples see changes within 90 days. And it's a combination of private one-on-one work with small group work, where we work with just the husbands or the wives. And of course, we have this comprehensive program, this course. And it's half the cost of traditional marriage therapy, plus triple the access to me and my professional team than you would if you hired a therapist. And we have a solid track record. But let me also tell you who it's not for. If you're a couple on the brink of divorce, or you have a severe mental illness, or really deep emotional problems, or severe background of trauma, then this program is not for you. I highly recommend you find a licensed therapist in your area that's competent, that can help you address these more difficult, deeper issues yourself. Okay, all of the details about this program are on getyourmarriageon.com. By the way, thank you for listening to this podcast, and make sure you hit the subscribe button in your favorite podcast player, whatever it is, so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks again for listening, and remember, go get your marriage on.